So this is the Community Management and Community and Mental Health panel. And to begin, I'd like to have my panelists introduce themselves. So, Em, why don't we start with you?
Hi, everyone. My name is Marie Shanley, better known as Mxiety online. You can just call me Em if that's a mouthful. So what I do is I host a live talk show, and there's kind of three types of main episodes that we do. One is talking to professionals and giving the opportunity for my community to ask them all kinds of questions based on their specialty. Or we have somebody come on and talk about what it's like to live with their particular mental health issue. Or the third one is my background is in research and medical editing. So I will research a topic pertaining to mental health, and we kind of deep dive into it with the community and have like a discussion around it.
Cool, thanks. And Jenesee.
Hi, I'm Jenesee Gray. I think my value add to this panel is my experiences originally with smaller companies, usually 0 to 25 people, new companies that are in the middle of having kickstarted something, or are smaller companies dealing with indies. So my experience, first of all, was doing VR with a Kickstarter company, which I ran the Kickstarter for with Jerry Ellsworth doing Cast AR, and then working with Mark Jacobs doing an MMO called Camelot Unchained. And now currently I work for Good Shepherd Entertainment. We're publishers in the indie industry doing what we call triple Is, working with some larger IPs like John Wick. So my experience is being deliberately hired to do community, and then that's kind of one of my titles as a smaller company.
Great, thank you. I'm really glad to have you both here. So one of the things I want to just start off by talking about is the difference between the really deliberate community that you've created with a real intentionality, and the type of community, Jenesee, that kind of comes to you through these games. And sometimes that's intentional, I guess, in the sense of the type of game you're making and the type of marketing you're doing. But kind of describe how your community comes to be and what that entails and what it looks like.
So for me, actually, I feel like it wasn't deliberate kind of situation. So what happened was I got on, at the time was Twitch, and I started talking about my experience, and then I would have episodes where we talked about research, and then I saw people were coming in that were generally just curious and wanted to talk to me about it. And then, so obviously we created a Discord community, and then slowly but surely, those people started supporting each other, and so they had this thing in common. This connection was, I guess, me and the show, and then ultimately they were there for each other. It became like a self-support group, and the community itself, I feel like I say, is like bigger than any one episode that I make. But it became deliberate in the sense that once I figured out that, okay, people are coming here and they're kind of looking for like a group support system, how do I make sure that I provide that without crossing any lines that I don't want to become anybody's therapist, nor am I qualified to be, right? How do I make sure that people are offering each other support without crossing lines? And another thing is, how do I make sure that people offer each other balanced support? So you don't have people coming in just being like, oh my gosh, I'm having an emergency. Oh my gosh, I'm having an emergency. Oh my gosh, I'm having it. And they're constantly coming and taking from the community, but not really giving back. And I think that was just the big thing is it was a learning experience, and then it was talking to professionals and really figuring out where my boundaries are and making sure that they were established with every new community member coming in, and making sure that just the rules were clear.
Awesome, thanks.
So at its base level, community is about connection, usually around obviously a common topic or something that makes everyone interested in actually interacting with each other. So that's easier when you're on the section of having a game or something very specific. People are there for a purpose. They're there to, build this commonality about a game. It's sort of a different beast when you come from the publishing side, because publishing is a little like, sprinting, like Gimli, very dangerous over short distances, but not really long term. So we have games releasing, maybe 6 games a year, something like that. So even though we're involved in the production process from the beginning, and that might be a 2-year process, I usually get more involved towards the last 6 months or so. So it's get this in, get this in, get this in, launch, and then, kind of wave begins again for another game. So originally the community I created for us was for user testing. So we had a private Discord, a public Discord with private channels. So people would come in because they wanted to alpha test like an early game before it was even announced to the public. So we'd bring them in, they'd have channels, they would alpha test this game, and then be interested, it would launch, and then sometimes that community would kind of fade out or transfer itself, lovingly be transferred by me, to the developers' Discord, so that they would continue to, because I'm creating seeds, basically, of communities, and then kind of moving them over. And now, organically, we've kind of begun to grow our own community of people that just really like to be together, and they have multiple games of ours that they enjoy. So that's kind of growing unintentionally, but intentionally right now. So that's a different sort of beast than the initial creative purpose. So it's interesting how they grow over time and kind of evolve into what they'd like to be.
What I'm hearing from both of you is that communities take on a life of their own very quickly, and they kind of shape themselves in profound ways, and then you find a way to ride that wave in a productive way as much as possible, right? Yeah. So then, in terms of mental health, what are the kind of the opportunities that you have inside your community, and what are the kind of challenges and dangers on the other side that you see in working inside these communities and in making them more explicitly yours and more explicitly intentional?
I think, and then I kind of briefly touched upon this, but it's a big one, and I reemphasize it over and over again. Of course, the biggest challenge, especially with a community that's established around the topic of mental health, is making sure that nobody goes there if they're experiencing an emergency, if they need consistent care repeatedly. We had a community member back in the way beginning. We had somebody come in. I remember somebody asked me, they're like, oh, this person's having a really hard time. Do you think we can invite them into the community? So I said, of course. And then this person was just continuously messaging and talking about their self-harm and talking about just all kinds of everything really that they were going to. They were really using this as a dumping ground for their emotions, even though that's kind of crass to say, but and so that was one of the most difficult, that first person was one of the most difficult things to handle, because we had to step in and kindly tell this person that, like, this is not going to be the place for you. We do want you to get help. Here are the resources. Please continue using them. Hey, we can continue touching base with you as you use these resources, but in this community, you cannot expect to constantly be getting the kind of help that, like, clearly you are looking for. And there were a lot of expletives in my direction. And so eventually, obviously, creating those rules and establishing those boundaries, once again, was the most important part, to make sure that when people came into the community, immediately they saw our rules. And like, one of the ones that I'm very proud of is the 60-40 rule, and that's the principle that relationships are not actually 50-50 ever. It's usually one person giving 60, one person giving 40, and what we ask in our community is that if you're gonna come in and sometimes you can only give 40 because you need the help, be sure to also provide that help to other people. And that weeded a lot of people out. But that was I think that was the biggest concern, and that was the biggest safety concern, just for everybody's safety. You don't want to come in, because we do have a separate support channel and we have a separate venting channel. And the support channel, it's still very clear that it is not, we're not going to carry you here. It's more, hey, my mom is really sick and I'm having a hard time. And people post encouraging messages, versus the venting channel is where you're gonna go and come in and dump your stuff and you're not expecting a response. And creating those funnels and making sure that people have different outlets for things and the expectations are set in each one. And then obviously none of this can happen. If it sounds like a lot of rules, it is. And none of that can happen without awesome moderators and other administrators that help me out so that I can be here and not constantly be tethered to my phone and helping somebody.
Mm-hmm.
I got really absorbed. Can you repeat the question?
That's awesome. So we were talking about, and here I am taking notes. We were talking about some of the explicit opportunities and challenges and dangers of around mental health in the community that you see.
Got you. For me, there's two sides. One of which is we deal with indie developers that are really just trying to achieve their dream of making a game, and they need a specific, services, especially for me, where I want to make sure that they have that creative freedom without, while I am their Valkyrie, making sure that they don't deal with some of the things that might disrupt that. Mm-hmm. So specifically for the user testing, I want to provide a safe space for the fans who are playing the game to be able to say, this is the worst thing I've ever played, and it sucks. And be able to convey that in a report that is a little more neutral to a developer so that they don't hear, you suck and you need to quit. So that's kind of the filter that I provide to make sure that the indie developers are protected from mental health. Just generally for the community itself, I think that it's important to set the tone of what you're building. And community, I call it community and not the community because it is a beast in some ways. Like when you're talking about individuals, that's an individual. But when you're talking about a whole group of people, that's almost its own entity. So setting the tone for how people coming in should expect this to go, expect the conversation to go, expect the respect level to go, and just kind of making sure that you shape the way that people communicate, I think is important for mental health because it's like step one, making sure that this isn't a toxic area, making sure that you are okay to say what you say even if you disagree, respectfully, making sure that you have, those things is kind of step one before things will escalate and help make that safe space for people that do have, maybe issues.
Mm-hmm. Do you find that being an example and actively setting a tone really can shape the community? And can you talk a little bit more, both of you, about how that works and how you do it?
Me. When it comes to me, I feel like I'm like a 1950s wife. Like I'm like, don't sass me, and oh boy. Like those are the kind of things that, So people tend to respond to me well because I think they look at me like I should have pigtails all day long. And so they tend to like, okay, well, we're going to treat you like a real person and we're going to respond to you like someone who's positive and, and they respond well to that. I think if I come in there with my giant band hammer and start to, react that way, that is going to have a ramification as well. So I come in there saying like, okay, well, you don't have to agree with me, but you have to have a reasonable argument and you have to have something that you want to share that is not just trolling. And a lot of times I will take things offline from the group and say like, okay, we're going to have a discussion. Obviously, and a lot of times whenever something happens, it's a conflict. It's because someone didn't realize what their words are being interpreted, how the words are being interpreted, or they didn't realize that this is what's going on. And diffusing situations where people don't jump in and pile on is really kind of like important for that tone. Like you need to step in before the pileup happens, before the accident happens, and put the stoplight up. So that's kind of, I think, how you can help that. Does that answer that question?
It does. Okay. Yeah. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah. So we have interesting situations where, and I remember again the first time this happened, it felt very kind of a little like scary. Powerful because somebody came into the chat room and we were talking about something rather benign and they came in, and this happens more often than we would hope, but they came in and they're like, I feel like hurting myself, like out of complete nowhere. And how I know that how I react to that situation is exactly how chat is going to continue and is going to set the mood. Mm-hmm. So if I react to that by saying like, oh, sorry, we can't talk about that here, or sorry, this is really not the place for that, and I ban them, you'll immediately see the rest of the chat room go like, oh yeah, I can't believe they said that. I can't believe they came in and said that. Versus if I come with, okay, here's resources, here's resources, here's what we're talking about today. If you want to join in and continue that conversation, then that's awesome. Otherwise, and I hope you can, the big one that we repeat over and over again is I hope that you can feel like this is a space where you can just be without feeling like you need to constantly be raising your hand and saying like, I'm feeling this thing. So that's a really, that's a really big one.
Mm-hmm. This brings up for me a question. You then, as a manager or a leader of a community, you're taking the brunt of a lot of this. So how do you handle that on a personal level? How do you handle that self-care or those boundaries? I mean, what is it? Is it boundaries? Is it? And I recognize that this may not be.
Define boundaries.
And there we have it.
It's for especially in the beginning, it was a little bit of touch and go, and I say this. It also depends on the night. Mm-hmm. If we have a night where, I don't know, school's out and it's the middle of the summer and the kids are out and they don't know how to handle the word mental health in the title of a stream, I might afterwards, like my self-care routine after that kind of episode of just like trolling and having to deflect the trolls, and I prefer to make I have two options kind of in response, which is I either make a joke and kind of maybe at their expense. Like one clip that went viral is I saying the hills are alive with the sound of music to a troll at one point after they called me fat. Yeah, so that's my option, or the other option is like, well, that's a shame because this is a really great community and you're missing out, so you have one more opportunity. We won't ban you, consider your next words. 9 times out of 10, their next words are bannable, but that one person will stick around and will. You asked me about self-care, and I'm talking to you about trolls. I'm sorry about that. Self-care, yes, me. What happens after? So there is a very distinct self-care routine, like after episodes, where I need to wind down and do specific things so that I feel like I'm officially off, and like my husband knows what that period is, versus I have a very hard time figuring out when emotional burnout is coming on and being able to catch it before I'm at the phase of like, I don't want to do this anymore, because that's the extreme that I will go to of like, no, I quit, the whole thing is done. And usually either one of my moderators or my husband, who's a wonderful support system for this whole thing, will say something to the effect of like, are you done or are you tired? Are you done for today or are you done for, like, can you imagine not doing this? And of course I usually take a second and then I go, hey guys, I'm away for a week. I will not be on Discord. I will not be, I'm taking my time. But I say, I am working on making sure that I do more preventative measures versus reactive to, oh my God, I'm emotionally drained, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
This is less of a problem as a publisher. When I was working for the MMO, the problem is that it's a global world we live in.
Yep.
So I only have so many hours that I'm awake during the day, and people come online in Europe and other places when I'm not awake. And it took a while to get to the point where I was like, okay, I cannot be there for everyone every second of every day. And there's going to be times where I just am not available. And hopefully emergencies don't occur during that time, but I'm just going to have to deal with whatever happens when I come back. Mm-hmm. So that's less of an issue now. I do take time to go bike riding in the forest in the evening and listen to my music. And I have 2 awesome guys that will come in and say, you have not eaten and it's been 8 hours, and here's some food, eat it, and things like that, like just to make sure that I do what I should do for basic self-care. And weirdly, this is like a double-edged sword. Because I work for small companies, we have a lot of hats. So for me, I'm the artist for our company. I'm also the investor relations person for our company, and I'm the event planner for our company. So I can't just focus 24 hours on the community because I have other work to do. So jumping into that other work is sometimes like a little bit of a switch off in my brain that I can kind of get away from having that constant interaction.
Recognizing that it's not even the only part of the game and the game experience.
Yeah. It's not all my self-identity.
Yep.
You know.
Yep. Yeah. What do you think are the misconceptions that people have about? So we've got the reason I have misconceptions that people have about about these online communities and the way they're, because I feel like one of the things you've touched on a lot is trolling, right? And that's an awful problem across all of the internet. But still you're persisting in these really wonderful communities that I think sounds like you find rewarding, and definitely the people in them find really valuable. So what is it? And can you what is the thing there that's so wonderful, and what are the things the assumptions that you find a lot of people make that are really wrong?
The wrong ones. I mean, we don't have enough time to go through the wrong ones. There's the whole idea that you cannot get online support the same way you can get in-person support. Yes, that wonderful oxytocin might be missing, but there's so much more with online communication that gets left out. The big one that I have learned and that I've been asked, I think, most often, which is, there goes the train of thought. It's just gone. But,
do you need me to jump in?
yeah, that'd be great, yeah.
Come back to that one.
Back to you. People are here because they're passionate about something.
Mm-hmm.
They're emotionally invested in something and they want to talk about it. How can you be upset about that at the baseline? Can you tell that I'm one of those people that still believes that people are lovely?
That's an amazing thing. That's a wonderful thing.
But, people come in, whether they're passionate in the sense that, this mechanic is broken and I cannot brush my teeth until you fix it. That's still passion. Like, they just want to be heard. So I hear you. I disagree with you, and I will pass that on to the developers later. But, they just want to be heard. And someone's there, I hear them, like, express yourself within a reasonable amount of expression. And, yes, I get it. I also love this. You love this. We love this together. It's not exactly the way you might want it, but we both love it. So I think there's a connection there that you can capitalize on, that you have to just understand that people they're there because they love something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
You try to remember it, right?
No, you did awesome. And I was paying attention, and I remembered my train of thought. So, the thing that I get asked most often is, what have you learned about people from this experience? And I think that ties very well into this question, and that is, we are all so different, and we are all very much the same. And that comes through, I think, in seeing a community and in seeing the ecosystem that a community creates the most. I have people who come in who say, I don't feel like I am this much myself around my family, husband, whoever. There are several transgender people in my community that live their lives in as a gender that they don't believe that they are, but they're in my community as who they truly believe, who they truly know themselves to be. And that's an honor. And like, I start welling up, because this is people coming in, because it's a mental health community, this is people coming in, sharing stories, sharing experiences, sharing intimate parts of themselves as a way to connect with other people that I just can't think of another place where that would be possible. Like, I've been in group sessions in person, and I've seen the kind of sharing that happens there, and it's beautiful and it's unique. But what you can get behind that little wall of anonymity, the kind of vulnerability that you can get from that interaction, you can't replicate that anywhere else. And I'm honored every day that I get to talk to people about the things that they might have not even expected they would ever open up about.
That's really beautiful. It also begs the question of like, is that kind of vulnerability and sharing possible outside of a kind of explicitly mental health themed space and outside of a slightly anonymized space? I mean, I wonder, that's not the norm in a community that you're creating. Does that exist to some degree?
I think so. I think it depends on maybe the genre of, if we're talking games specifically, maybe the genre of the game, how long they've been together, and how frequently they get together, depending, like if you're talking about forums. Forums, I think, are a better forum for them to sit there and talk about these kind of things. Twitter, Facebook, all that stuff, I don't even sometimes consider that community. That's more fandom. But I'm talking about building something where there's actual interactions and relationships. I think it is. I think it's possible. I mean, your community is built to be that, and people go in hopefully knowing that this is what they're going to expect, and they can have those real discussions. That sort of happens organically elsewhere, or it doesn't. That depends on the community.
That idea of fandom versus community, I'm writing that down. I think that's really powerful. Yeah.
I think tying into that, I've actually had several people ask me, they're like, I won't open up a mental health channel or like a venting channel in my Discord because I'm really afraid and like I'm not prepared for that. Or they'll say, hey, can you join my Discord so that I can open a mental health channel and then you can help me there? Which is, all of those are no. But my response to that is, I don't know that is needed. I think I am very happy myself to have a Discord that I go into and I talk exclusively about Cuphead and how I can't get through a boss and how annoying that is and frustrating, and that's what I'm going to talk about there. And then when I want to be vulnerable and open, I go into my own Discord and I talk to those people about that. And on one hand, is that great because that's once again siloing mental health away into something else. On the other hand, I think everything has a purpose, and I think if people want to be vulnerable, if a game, makes them like I'm imagining somebody who's playing Stardew Stardew Valley would probably have some emotions stirred up that they would want to talk about, and I could see that then being necessary in that Discord to have a little space for them to vent. But like one of my friends plays the GTA role-playing. I don't know that he needs the mental health channel. I think he's okay. And that's exactly it. I think there's a space for everything, and that's it.
I think you're right though, because community will let you know. Like, does it need the space? Like I will sometimes, when I'm having a really hard day, I'll go into the StackUp Discord, and that's hardcore. That's hard mode right there, because that's not created to have a mental health aspect to it, but I feel like that's how that evolved, just because of the great work they do, helping veterans, making sure that they can play games and all that stuff. And I feel like that's probably something that just evolved because that's what their community needed, so they answered that call.
They did. Yeah. So StackUp is a great organization that works with veterans and active duty service members, mostly in the U.S. They bring and they've got a whole Overwatch League-relaed Discord and mental health support. I'm underselling it. They've got some research. They're doing some research behind it. They're working with the federal government, and it's pretty fantastic. And I want to say, Mxiety is one of the things that she does is as part of her streaming. She's a Take This streaming ambassador, which is a small program. She's one of the inaugural members. And we're kind of confronting that same question. See, these are streamers who are explicitly educated around mental health and talk about it explicitly in their streams and create intentional community around that. And Em is a fantastic example of that, a shining light. And what's really interesting is we created that because we want to change the tone of conversation around mental health online and streaming. But it's a chicken and egg thing. We want lots of people to be part of that community and to be able to feel comfortable, but a lot of people aren't and need like support to get to a place where they feel empowered to talk about it, and also to understand the difference between creating a supportive community and providing like actual therapy online. There's a really important difference there. So I feel like it feels to me like there's an open question there about the time and place and how that gets created and what resources, so this leads into the last question, what resources do we still need that don't exist or don't exist enough to make it possible to have those spaces online really function well and really do what they're designed to do, the mental health spaces?
So there's this little organization called Take This, and they're pretty fantastic at providing resources for streamers, and actually they have classes where they teach the ambassadors first, but I know also like Twitch partners, where there are courses that help people establish those boundaries of where am I going to be okay with talking about mental health in my community, where should I draw the line. And honestly, that stuff, I've talked about it with Dr. B so many times, that stuff scares me quite a bit sometimes, because not only are people end up being basically therapists or like somebody's sole emotional support, and that's really scary, but they just don't, the people who will come to me and they'll be like, how do I handle this situation? My answer is usually, you shouldn't be handling that situation at all. And that's a big problem, number one. So creating, making sure that those resources are out there and available, that if I am interested in providing mental health support to my community in a healthy way, that I know how to do that, right? So whether that's promoting mental health first aid, whether that's making sure that the Take This courses are offered a little bit more broadly, like that is all phenomenal stuff. There's also a organization called No Stigmas, and you can become a No Stigmas ally, and that's totally free, and that basically educates you on how to talk to people online about mental health and what not to do, because that's the thing that does scare me the most. We want to be open and we want to be as inclusive as possible, but you know, I'll walk into a stream that's tagged mental health and it's just somebody word vomiting how they're feeling at their community with, you know, and you can tune out arguably if you want to, but if you feel like you're part of a community and this is your streamer and this is who you're connected to, if they're sharing their story, you might not necessarily tune out, and then it's on that community to provide emotional support, which they are definitely also not ready to do. So I just feel like if we could do a better job disseminating information on how to provide mental health support in a positive way to those people who are ready to take it, I think that will eventually broaden it to more people, because right now, when several people, people at Twitch, think about what mental health support looks like, they go, yikes, it's people offering support that they're not qualified to provide. So if we can create a space that says, hey, this is how you do it, and that becomes normal, that becomes the normal part, and people know they have access to that information whenever they need to, more people are likely to do it in a healthy way, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. And I didn't stage that question, I swear to you. But I will say, I mean, one of the things we've always had on the front page of our website is linked to resources. Whole page of how to find a therapist, how to access crisis lines and hotlines and warm lines across the U.S., Canada, and internationally. And that, just having that, knowing that stuff is available at your fingertips is really important. Yeah. And did you have anything to add? I didn't want to.
I think what we're doing, just having discussions where mental health is okay as a topic, that's acceptable to talk about. I mean, for me, 6 years ago when I had, this is probably the worst case scenario, where I had gone to sleep, a community member asked a question, I wasn't there to respond to the question, and then it became, why aren't you answering my question? You don't like me. You don't like me because of this. Your game sucks. You suck. You think I suck. I'm going to kill myself. And it escalated for like 6 hours until I woke up and then just went. And not having 6 years ago anywhere to say, like, I mean, then you're calling someone who's an online face going like, what, are you okay? Are you okay? Like not having someone, not having the resources for Take This, not having the resources of those phone numbers, not having discussions that say mental health is even a thing. That's all changed in the last 6 years, in the last however many years. So now when that happens, you have resources, you have knowledge of like, okay, these are the steps to take, rather than just kind of floundering around going like, I hope you're okay somewhere in Canada or wherever you are, So that I think is a great step forward. And so I don't have suggestions except to say like, yay, good job.
One small step at a time. Is there anything else you would like to add before I open things up to questions?
Oh no, I think I've said enough.
All right. Are there questions from the audience? Like, no? Seriously? Sure, somebody's got a question.
We're so
Dr. B.
comprehensive.
So, like, what do you both wish, especially startup organizations, know about managing a community in a healthy way with, and when I say healthy, I mean with good boundaries of not taking it too personally while maintaining a thriving community?
So the question, yeah.
I guess another way of putting it is, what do you wish you knew that you know now?
Yeah, what are the basic knowledge and tools that you wish startups would have?
Oh my gosh, I wish it was more mandatory to take mental health first aid courses. That changed my entire outlook and what I was set to do and where my boundaries were and where it was okay for me to step away and where it was okay for me to handle self-care, what is okay. Like, I wish I had that information back then, and I wish I had it immediately. I also wish somebody would have just told me, you know what, I probably wouldn't have listened, but I wish somebody would have told me that, like, you're not here to cure the world. Like, I am not going to solve everybody's problems. I do not have the time, the possibility, the training to solve everybody's problems. I think I took it very personally and decided that it was on me and my community to make sure that people went to therapy, that people took their medication, that people, like, all those things that are ultimately on the individual to do at the end of the day. I think I took it upon myself to worry about whether or not people were doing what they were supposed to do. And I wish I could. I think we've definitely eradicated that, because that blows up in your face really fast, and it becomes unmanageable, and you can't really grow it. So it didn't last very long, but there was a hero complex there for a second.
Yeah, understood.
I think specifically to Dr. B's question about startups or smaller companies that are new, diversify your discussions, because as much as everyone wishes when you start up that you had tons of things to share and here's a product and all that stuff, it takes time to have a reasonable subject for you to come together on. So if you start with a small community and those people get together and they talk, daily, weekly, whatever, they actually get to know each other as people, and having the relationships that they build together keeps them from turning into a giant toxic waste later, because they have accountability for each other, because that's Bob, who I've been talking to for 6 months, and I know Bob, and I'm going to be nice to Bob. And then when new people come in, I'm going to make them part of my community. I'm going to make them part of my family. It's almost like a family in some ways. You become part of that. And then someone comes in and they act up, they're accountable to the entirety of the community, who most of the time I don't have to enforce on, because they'll be like, excuse me, that's not how we act. And that's where you want to be. You want to be where the community steps in and says, no, that's not acceptable.
Yeah. So you have really strong community norms, and you have a complexity of relationship, and you have really good boundaries.
No, you're right. I mean, every one of us is usually like a bleeding heart, and you have to draw the boundary of like, I can't save every one of you, and I can't spend all day in PMs privately with you. This is my job. This is not me. Boundary.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why I'm in therapy, by the way. It's boundaries, healthy boundaries.
Yeah.
So.
Over and over and over again.
Any other questions? Yeah, Kelly.
Working with your communities, what do you wish you had? We talked about what you wish you had in the past. What would you wish for in the future in terms of tools, support, resources, things like that?
Oh, this is going to be a very American answer, but access to affordable healthcare. I mean, really, because that's the number one, like, I laugh because I'm crying on the inside, because that's the number one thing that people come to me and they're saying, I can't afford a therapist, I need some resources in the meantime. And we try to bridge that gap by saying, go here, here's a website, here's maybe a workbook that could help, all that stuff. But yeah, we just wouldn't need to do that if it was easier to get mental health. I know the rest of the world isn't much easier either, because people will come from the UK or from Germany and say, like, I'm on a wait list. There's one person in my community who is a phenomenal human being. He's been on a wait list for 1 year and 3 months. We're all counting with him to see a therapist in Germany, and that's heartbreaking. That's not how it should be.
I don't have a lot of mental health tool needs. I mean, my only wish, I guess, is attention span. Like, there are so many people, so many products, so many people competing for attention. It would be nice if community had a chance to form around real deep things rather than just the dancing monkey that we're kind of required to be a lot of times just to keep someone's attention. If there can be substance and something that's worth staying for rather than just the flash in the pan.
Which speaks to how much you value these communities as a potential space. Sure. Doris, yeah.
Yeah, my question is big in general. What can we as a community do to increase visibility of our mutual efforts? So people know about it, right?
Yeah.
We make these games for mental health. We try to get them to be listed on the NAMI website, no chance. And other organizations, lots of outreach. It costs so much resources to just do that outreach and to find an organization that will pick it up and get those resources that are being developed by others to their community. So what kind of infrastructures can be built to support these efforts?
The first answer is super cheesy, which is just like, can we just support each other a little bit better instead of tearing each other down on Twitter? That'd be great. That is probably the best way to start. But I mean, here I am, and I've been craving mental health related video games. I didn't know so many of them existed. And so, like, I will gladly play your game. So however you can make sure you connect to the right people, the better it is. And somebody like me, like, I will let people know about your thing if I really think that it's awesome and a resource. Like, for example, somebody recently just kind of they threw a link in my direction and it worked. It was it's called Adventures in Mxiety, and it's this little mobile game, and it's phenomenal. Nikki Case made it, and like, I know his name now. I know all about the game, and we played it as a community, and it was perfect because it was like enough for everybody's attention span. It was like about 40 minutes, and I mean, like, I'm craving stuff like that shows people mental health aspects, that helps me educate other people. So what can we do as a community? I think we need to just, the Miss America answer is that we just need to be better about supporting each other.
From my perspective, and this is going to sound like a bald-faced solicitation, but you know, I can only do the work of Take This with money. Like, we need funding.
Yeah.
And the more money I have, the more publicity I can buy, the more the more work I can do, and my team can do, and the more we can travel and talk about it. You know, our resources are limited, and that's just the way these things go. But it's to some degree it's just a resource issue. Yeah. There's more to it, but that's yeah.
This is kind of on you, and I hate to do that. It's one of those, like, don't send me a press release in Arial with a link that I have to go 4 places to read a video, to see a video, something like that. Like, personalize connections and find a way to relate what you do to what is happening. Like if I'm on the front page of Steam and I'm streaming a game that has some kind of relationship to what you do, I will mention what you do if I know what you do. And that's on me because I'm lazy and I don't know all the things that are happening. But if you can find people that are doing something that relates to what you're doing and would be willing to help promote you, I think that's like a marketing tactic that might work. Like I would definitely share things if people PM'd me on Discord or they reached out to me on Facebook, not in a like advertising way, but just said, hey, I'm doing this really cool thing. Like I'd like you to be involved. I would probably do that. It's just that, you know, sometimes it's hard to even know that's happening, or I'm just deleting the press release.
Yeah, personal connections and outreach.
Yes.
I mean, I want to call out Mark because Mark creating a space like this is invaluable, and this is the first time we've ever done this, and it's small this year, but it's bigger than we thought it was going to be, and it happened, and it will happen again, and to have this opportunity for Em to have the opportunity to discover all these games and get so excited about them, and she's sitting in her seat like bouncing away, is fabulous, and it will only grow from here. I mean, this is really the start of something quite important. So, Mark, let's all a round of applause for Mark.